Hi, this is Phil Kaveny. Welcome back to my channel. This program is going to be in partial satisfaction for some work I owe my friend, dear friend, and spiritual advisor, Dr. Pache. And it will bring me into the content of some work I'm doing with him on Buddhism. So I'll start with this poem that I read for his class. It's illustrated now and it goes, Nike, a poem by Philip Edward Kaveny. Out of the blackness she came, winged and white she was. Nike. And now we're going to go to the final draft of a Buddhist emptiness inside John Keats' Ode to a Grecian Urn, which is going to be what Dr. Pache gets in a while. And when I originally thought about doing this program last night, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I have an opportunity to tape, and I have all these different things, but I really have nothing to do. But the person I'm working with has these other skills which are exceedingly useful for the kind of creative project that I'm doing. And so I better have something to do. And I thought, well, I have this PowerPoint on my tectonic theory of literature. I'm not going to quite do that now, but what that involved was me going through my back files in my computer and thinking about other work and making connections. And that's the point at which I found something that, again, is very important to me. It's called a Kaveny Kollage. And I did it 10 years ago. And what this was, for me, literature has always been a way for me to meet, interact, and share things with people. There are reasons for that. And there are people like Marvin Minsky, who's a very prominent AI person, who says human communication is pretty difficult in general. But if we have these shared cultural things, objects, then it gives us connections. And out of these connections, we can kind of get to know each other. And so I found something called a Kaveny Kollage. And I did this August 7th of 2008. And at the time, I was involved with a poetry group, mostly academics, mostly UWOK academics, and they absolutely hated me. You know, I wouldn't let them touch my poetry. I said I wouldn't let you scribble on an oil painting, and they got really mad at me because of that. And so I tried to bring this collage in, because I was going to read it to them. But they just made it so that I couldn't and made me unwelcome. But then I discovered this Kaveny Kollage thing. And this was what made me meet a guy named Don Goodearl, who promised it was okay if I use his name. Don is the man who I probably respect the most of just about anybody I know. I may have said this in the last video, because he's lived a life out in the world. He's been in New York, he's been in publishing. People who I know that are famous editors used to work for him. And so I gave him my collage, and he printed it up into a little booklet. And so I thought I would start reading some things from it, just to talk about how in the process of preparing for a program I had nothing, I go to emptiness. And the emptiness is like the emptiness in John Keats' poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. And the point is, what appears to be empty may in fact be the first stage in creation. So this is a story. Most people actually like these stories. A lot of times people tell me I'm a brilliant writer, but they don't like what I write. So I'm brilliant and dislike. This people like. So this is something I wrote. It's almost 10 years ago. Today, August 7th, 2008, is our 21st anniversary. For all those years, Jan Bogstead has been my one and only wife. Sometimes in my darkest moments, I think of the inconsolable sadness of the last 19 years of my life would have been if an old dog named Zeus would not have barked in early September 1989. Zeus belonged to my wife's roommate, Kathy, when she shared an apartment with her in River Falls, Wisconsin. This was because my wife and I were forced to live separated by 240 miles of Interstate 90 for professional reasons. Think of it as kind of a postmodern marriage. I had gone back to graduate school reluctantly. She wanted to come back to Madison and finish her PhD on the weekends. And so we were stuck apart for a long time, actually 13 years. But back to Zeus. Zeus was a kind of a golden and white German Shepherd mix with a long muzzle, sparkling eyes, but his size and features were more like that of a Sheltie, and he weighed about 35 pounds. When I met Kathy and Zeus in the mid-80s, he was getting a little bit long in tooth, but like the Collie Thane in the Albert Tathian Terhune stories I read when I was a violent and alienated teacher, Zeus's mind and other senses waxed as his physical power waned. Well, anyway, Zeus barked and woke my wife and Kathy up less than 2 minutes before their two-story townhouse erupted into a violent and deadly flashover so horrible it blew out the panes in their thermoplane windows out of their casements. My wife knew what to do, and it was too hot to see the flames. Jan knew what to do because she had heard my late brother, John Kaveny, a decorated Madison firefighter with 30 years service, lectured on flashover. And flashover is the thing that happens when all the air gets sucked out of a situation. You can't see the flames, and if you don't go low enough, your lungs will be just scorched. And Zeus knew what to do. He knew what to do to get them out, and he lived several more years with loving care. Zeus saved their lives in a way. He saved my life. Towards the end of Zeus's life, I had a famous Madison potter make Zeus a water dish decorated with reed, grass, cattails, and prancing deer. The potter heard the story, and when I came to pay him, he refused and charged me nothing for the dish. Zeus used it until it became his memorial. Interesting enough, the potter was a bicyclist and apparently had bicycled 270 miles in one day across the Great Salt Flats. We had a strange bond. This is another thing that comes from this Kaveny Kollage, and this is how my Fenris story came to be. This is Fenris Unchained, which is up on my blog and will be a book at some point. But I remember reading this to people, and I was reading this to people with my wife and her friend Kathy in River Falls, and I guess it's almost 30 years. It's almost 30 years now. The moon is mother to my madness. She calls to me in cold chrome light. I and the tides have no choice. Yet, like King Canute, I cannot stop the tides, and yet my human parts will not be washed away. Blood is like salt water to my thirst. Okay, that's another one that I had. And what I'm saying is, in the process of looking for something, I found these other things. And in the process of having nothing, I'm back to my creative work, looking at things I've done years ago and pulling it together. So maybe that feeling of emptiness isn't so bad. This is a story I like and most people don't get. But anyway, it has to do with workers on a cathedral having a conversation with the devil. And it goes like this. There's three workers, and the devil says, "What are you doing?" the devil asked the first worker. "Laying bricks," he said. "What are you doing?" the devil asked the second worker. And he said, I'm making a wall. And he asked the third worker, what are you doing? He said, I'm building a cathedral. That day, the devil gave everybody the day off, and no souls were lost. All right, I'm not sure exactly my time now, but I'm going to read another story that people wish I would write more of, and I may in my Boys of Summer. It's called Miss Schultz Remembered. Okay, I'm going to tell the story rather than read it. And I'm not going to read the story about how I won my soul back in a chess game today. But for most of my life, I've been a hard materialist. And what that means is we who are hard materialists look at the world in kind of a causal sense. And we tend to, we're not necessarily atheists or agnostics, but we're certainly skeptical as hell. And having had that point of view since I was about 7 or 8 years ago, and not being too far from it now, except that I am Christian, believing in the divinity of Christ, and if you have 4 or 5 hours, I'll explain to you what that means, but I don't right now. I would say I had this thing happen to me. I had this teacher named Miss Schultz, and we really didn't like each other. And I was about 5 feet and maybe 200 pounds. And I had a situation where I would take the bus to school with my father, the same bus he would go to work. And she found out about it, and she made me not do that and told the gym teacher I was lazy. And so I didn't get that time with my father. And of course I got even with her too, saying that she looked like the wrong end of an elephant going the other way and things like that. So we sort of held our own. But then I remember one day I saw Miss Schultz on the playground. She was quite nervous because there was a lot of snow around, and she was afraid I was going to do something, hit her with a snowball or I don't know what, but something. But instead of doing that, I looked at her and said, why, hello, Miss Schultz, why are you? And after I said that to that person, I felt perceptibly warmer. I felt like I don't know, like somebody had turned on a radiator or something. And I always found that problematic and interesting and strange, and I still do. Miss Schultz was about 6 feet tall. She'd probably been born maybe at the turn of the 19th century because she was in their mid-50s then. And the only thing that she ever once said to me is, yes, I once had a boyfriend, but he got killed going over the top. And what that really meant was that her boyfriend served in the U.S. Army during World War I, and going over the top meant to attack out of trenches, and he was killed. And later, I became kind of an expert in World War I, and I can still talk freely about it. And I never talked to her again. But in a sense, I've always sort of felt like I've been close to her. Now, the story itself is longer than this, but if you go to my blog, The Works of Phil Kaveny, you can read that and Grace and many of my other stories. And I hope this in some way kicks me in to working on a number of projects. But I want to show how literature is not just something that sits on a page. It reaches out and it pulls people together, and stories contribute to our humanity, and it has a positive place in any curriculum. And I think that's a good enough thing to say for today, so tune in for the next one and I'll have a specific program.